Bit of a melancholic day, ain't it? Well, more like week, because the Wii U online servers are officially dead. Just like a Vandam in a numbered Xenoblade game, they were really cool while they're here, but they are already gone. But there's an aspect of Xenoblade Chronicles X that I think is worthy of discussion and exploration. Yeah, let's get a little bit theoretical today, shall we? Oh yeah. Oh dude, I almost burped midway through that. It's gonna be a special kind of video, ain't it? Xenoblade Chronicles X was the only Xenoblade game to come out on the Wii U specifically. And it's also the Xenoblade game that is the most different from the numbered games, 1, 2, and 3. And in one major way, in regards to multiplayer. Yeah, Xenoblade has multiplayer, at least it did with X. Xenoblade Chronicles X is a really, I could go on, grindy game. However much you think there is to grind in Xenoblade X, multiply it by 10. To give you a hint, monsters exist that have loot drops, right? Nothing special there. However, then consider the fact, to get certain drops, you have to target and break certain limbs of various monsters. And even then, it's only a small chance for certain items to drop, let alone the stuff you have to gather around in the open world, but funnily enough, Xenoblade X had a workaround to this. You see, there's a couple of ways to actually acquire materials. You can either play the game, duh, or you can trade in tokens you gain through doing the online battles for various resources that could really expedite the grind. And for certain skills, it almost felt borderline mandatory to do online. And I think for Prague Ares it actually was, but don't quote me on that one. Skills being the giant robots you can pilot, by the way. Now, I'm not here to argue that Xenoblade X's multiplayer was the best. Let's be fair here, it was on the Wii U and Nintendo Online. And I didn't even partake of it that much back in the day, but there's some aspects to it that I think are worthy to be explored and well talked about, because there's some really interesting utilizations that could take place, or just gameplay evolutions that could take place for Xenoblade as an IP going into the future. Now, this is not to say that I want Xenoblade to become a multiplayer game, but I think having multiplayer components could be really cool for it. There's an argument to be made that Xenoblade X's multiplayer only really worked because the main character was a creator character. It wasn't a standard character like Shulk, Rex, or Noah. The closest that X had was Elma, but you played as your own character that you created, like a regular RPG, or like another kind of RPG. But what this allowed you to do was to essentially gang up with a whole bunch of other players to take on these giant boss fights, and if you played Xenoblade X, you know that spectacle and scale are the names of the game. Giant boss fights in these giant open areas that you can navigate or use your own scale or your own combination of abilities, and it was just really cool. You see, Xenoblade X didn't begin and end with the main story. I wouldn't argue that 1, 2, or 3 do either, but I wouldn't say that the end game is nearly as fleshed out as it is in X. You see, over the course of the game in X, more spots of the map open up, and these giant boss fights really open up and become available to you and come online, as well as a whole host of skills and cool weaponry and doodads and combinations that you can have access to. There's also a metric crapload of side content in X, and I think the bones of this system could be really interesting going into the future, especially if they ever want to bring back Xenoblade X. Do it already! Like, my idealized Elysium fantasy would be that the Nintendo Switch 2 comes out, has banger online, an Ethernet port on the launch version of the freaking console, by the way. Yeah, my Switch doesn't have an Ethernet port. Sad days, I know. And we get, like, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition with multiplayer. How cool would it be? Going into the world of Mira, everyone, like, equipped with their skills and all their loadouts going on to fight some cool boss fight. It doesn't have to be complex or in-depth or anything like that. Sometimes simplicity is key, and when it comes to Xenoblade, a lot of the times, just a really cool encounter and sense of scale can really carry things. And if that can exist alongside providing players en masse an alternate route to grind in the game, or possibly even expedited way to grind in the game, then I think that's really cool. And Xenoblade X, funnily enough, has housing. Yeah, you have a barracks that you can customize in Xenoblade X. How cool would it be to be able to invite your friends, or, say, members of the community, to each other's barracks and just show things off? say you have a really tough quest that you want to have accomplished, but you're kind of underleveled or undergeared or whatever, or for whatever reason, you just can't beat it. Call in the boys and all of a sudden you can go in with a squad and take it down. And maybe they could get rewarded with that online currency so that they can trade it in for the resources that they actually want and care about, so that they have incentive to just help you with things. We don't need it to be a complete MMORPG, right? Though I think a Xenoblade kind of game in that style could work. Even the bare bones essential aspects to it could really be interesting and fun. I get the argument that this could probably only work in the confines of a Xenoblade game that has a character creator, unlike 1, 2, and 3 where you play as, Shulk, Rex, and Noah. Though maybe you could get it to work. I just think it's a concept that could really be worth exploring, because I love Xenoblade for the story, the world, the atmosphere, and the music. I think a lot of the times, though, they kind of, I wouldn't say drop the ball, but underdevelop the really cool combat system and gameplay loop that is there, and don't fully flesh it out or explore and put the gameplay on as high of a pedestal as they put the story. I've kind of talked about before a lot, borderline to the point of repetition, that I think Xenoblade Chronicles X focuses in on the gameplay and the side content and the exploration of Mira, as much as Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 focus in on having a grandiose world and an epic narration and a great cast of characters. And bear in mind, I don't think X is a slouch in those regards either, it's just I think the focus is pivoted over to those other categories. If we could get a Xenoblade game that excels in the story, world, and atmosphere, and just overall immersion in the story and narration and cast of characters as 1, 2, and 3, while bringing to the table the beautiful vistas and open world exploration and gameplay mechanics of, say, Xenoblade X, if we can get a Xenoblade game that can merge those aspects together while also refining them, I mean, we're talking about a top 5 game of all time for me there, right? Like, Xenoblade 2 is already my second favorite game of all time, second only to Nier Automata. Like, that would rival it. I think in certain ways Xenoblade 3 was heading in the right direction. I think actually exploring the world in Xenoblade 3 was way more interesting, because in a lot of ways 3 was greatly inspired by Xenoblade X mechanically. But I don't think they went far enough, especially in terms of overall exploration. How cool would it have been to be able to utilize interlinks to navigate the parts of the map that you couldn't get to otherwise? Kind of like the scale mechanic from X. Like, you don't need the flying aspect to it, but just simply being able to explore and change the scale of the world, I think brings a lot to the table. And it's an element from games that I've truly missed after having played Xenoblade X. And I can only imagine how cool it would be to, like, say, on a stream, bringing all of chat in, everyone riding their scales, and we all go to a certain boss fight and fight it up. It would be really reminiscent of those old school MMORPG raids where you and your entire guild would go to one location, whether it was for PvE or PvP. I think Xenoblade can, like, I don't want it to fully submerge into that idea, but I think dipping its toes in that idea and those philosophies could really benefit the overall gameplay loop, and especially the post-game. This isn't something where I'm like, you gotta do exactly as I say or you're wrong. It's more like, hey, I think these ideas are worth exploring and discussing, and maybe there's some version of this idea or this philosophy that could be re-implemented into the series going into the future. Because I can't imagine there's going to be another Xenoblade game on the Switch. I imagine everything from here on out will be the next console, and if they're able to bring together better online than what the Switch had, or even what the Wii U had, alongside with some more power, I think there's a lot of potential here. Sure, it's a bit optimistic, but where's the fun in not being optimistic sometimes? The only thing is it's important not to set unrealistic expectations. But yeah, I want Xenoblade to be the best version of itself that it possibly can be. Not to rest on its laurels, but to try and break the boundaries and to try and grow and to be something better than it was before. And I think in a lot of ways 3 attempted to do so, and I don't think it hit the mark every single time, but I applaud the effort. And I applaud them for trying to go back to X in some way and to be inspired by that design philosophy and to try and reincorporate that into the series. I thought this was really prevalent, especially in the overall zone exploration, the side content. Like, compare the side content and actually exploring the world from Xenoblade 3 to Future Redeemed. They pretty much take different aspects of X's formula and try and see which fits. Legit, it feels like 3 was half of X and Future Redeemed was the other half. It borderline felt like an experiment to just determine what players were more receptive to, because let's be fair here, not too many people played X, because it was on the freaking Wii U of all things. And Xenoblade has exploded in popularity since then, with the Switch and Xenoblade 2, so it was probably smart of them to test out these formulas and to test out these gameplay design philosophies, but I also think a multiplayer component to them could really go hand in hand, especially with how vast the world of 3 can feel at times. Like, how cool would it be to have a mode where you have that multiplayer for fighting certain giant boss fights and whatever, but you can see the progression that other players have. Like, you can see the Collectopedia, the Enemypedia, etc., etc. Or even just be able to see their cool armor and whatnot. And if they bring back the skull mechanic, for the love of God, bring that one back, please. Be able to check out the actual skulls and see how it shapes up to yours. There's a mechanic, well, not a mechanic, but it's one of those ideas from older MMORPGs that's kind of lost its way, where you can just see someone else in the world, they have something really cool, you inspect them to see what they have, then you're like, oh, this axe they have is really cool, where did they get this? How can I go get this? Oh, this suit of armor looks really awesome. What did they do in order to acquire this? This was also the thing with like games like FPS games back in the day, with Halo. Oh, how did you get Katana? Or how did you get Recon? Or Hayabusa? Stuff like that. Oh, something cool that they have, I want that because I saw them have it. How can I go out and get it? Being able to incorporate that idea or that philosophy into a Xenoblade game, I think has so much potential. And I'd love to see Monolith just flex their muscles and try something like this again. Was it perfect at X? No. Was it a really cool idea that could be iterated on in the future? Yes. But let me know what you all think. Let me know what your opinions are. Would you like to see some kind of multiplayer aspect brought into Xenoblade in the future? What about a Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition? Would you all love to see that? I certainly would. I'd love to hear your thoughts, hear your opinions, and to hear your own ideas about gameplay-wise, right? What you would love to see out of Xenoblade going into the future. I would love to see more enemy mechanics, more enemy boss design mechanics, return to scales, or a similar mechanic. Even just an iteration and a fleshing out of, say, interlinks in a way, to make them more in line with scales, but with maybe some more interesting mechanics for combat. But I would love to see a return of the Enemypedia and Collectopedia that, say, Future Redeemed had. I like it when Xenoblade has that completionist style to its gameplay, and I'd love to see it explored in the future, and I think multiplayer components or raid fights could work really well here. And with that, I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making that video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games if you can, and as always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody, until we meet again.